Number 5 on this list is the Hoher Market. Hoher Market is directly in the center of Vienna in Austria and is quite beautiful today. It has fancy supermarkets, boutique cafes, and high-profile stores for people to window shop and explore. Therefore, it's definitely a solid tourist attraction, but it may not be the best spot to go visit after you hear some of the things that happened here in the past. This market for over 500 years was where the state-sanctioned executions would take place. 500 years of people being killed off has resulted in thousands of deaths piling up over those said years. The manner to how these people were killed has changed and morphed over the years as well too. Most were hangings, but some were quarterings, which is a process where someone gets chopped up into tiny little pieces. Yeah, it's pretty graphic. Because of this, there have been many reports of hauntings in this market. Apparitions of people dressed in clothes dating back to the 14th century have shown themselves to people before. One report has someone detailing an instance that they turned a corner and swore they saw a dead corpse right in front of them. When they returned to the location with another person though, there was no sign of it at all. Other people have sworn that they've seen the ghost of an executioner here before, standing and waiting to hang someone. I honestly think that going to this market would be okay, but if I was to go, then I'd much rather go in the daytime. Probably not the spot you want to be walking around at nighttime with the ghosts of the executed. Number 4 on this list is Seitenstadtgasse 6. I hope I pronounced that right, but I kinda highly doubt it. Either way, this is a building in Vienna that you shouldn't want to stay in at all. It all started when a woman tried to murder her husband. Not the best way to start a story, but here we are. The woman who lived in this building tried to poison her husband, but on the same night she meant to do it, actually died herself. Now, her spirit still resides at this place and haunts the people who stay here. Visitors of this building say that they'll see this ghostly apparition sitting in a wooden rocking chair and swaying back and forth, looking as eerie as ever. Apparently, this wooden chair also emits electromagnetic rays. Why it does this or from where this legend came from is currently unknown. This woman also isn't alone in her haunting of this place either. She was said to have a very pretty white cat, and this ghost kitty still sticks by her. The cat wanders the halls and can appear and disappear as it chooses. It's said that if someone looks at it, then mischief will find them and cause them major problems in their life. I should also note that this building isn't even that nice to begin with. Like, at least the market I could get a nice coffee or something, but best case scenario here is that I get bothered with rats, whereas the worst case scenario is I get murdered by some ghost woman. Not the spot that I recommend you stay at if you're heading to Vienna. Number 3 on this list is Malavenspitzbubenhaus. Now that is super hard to say, so for the remainder of this entry, I'm gonna refer to this as the Vienna Prison. This place was put out of commission a long time ago, several hundred years ago in fact. There is a new building there now, but it's still haunted with the same ghosts that riddled this prison several hundred years ago. The prison was known for something truly horrible: torture. Apparently, presumed criminals would be taken into the basement of this prison and brutally tortured in this spot. This torture was so horrible though that those that were kept here would sometimes take their own life prior to this treatment. The souls of those that were tortured and the souls of those that killed themselves are the ones that haunt this place to this day. Blood-curdling screams have been heard throughout this entire building. People have also reported feeling attacked by spirits here, like they're ripping at their own soul and tearing them apart. Just because you destroyed the initial building that caused these atrocities to occur doesn't always mean that the ghosts of those that were hurt will automatically move on. This is exactly what happened here, and it's why you guys should never go. Number 2 on this list is Friedhof der Namenlosen. This place is a cemetery, and it's been nicknamed the Cemetery of the Nameless. Amy Script details the history of this place beautifully by writing, throughout the 1800s, the Danube River, which cuts through Austria, was often littered with bodies. These were usually drowning victims, those who had committed suicide, and often cause of death was unknown. Once the river had claimed these lives, it would carry the lifeless bodies of its victims ashore, hence dumping them in the same area. As even more bodies accumulated, respectful locals sought out solutions to offer them peace. The Cemetery of the Nameless was erected to offer these unidentified nameless people a place to rest, because they could not be interred at any of the Catholic cemeteries in Vienna. Probably as many of the victims were of suicide. Bodies were routinely collected and interred at this cemetery, sporting markers listing them as nameless people. Almost 500 people were interred at the original cemetery, which was eventually abandoned. Today, a more modern and smaller segment of the cemetery continues to stand. This burial plot holds the remains of 104 people. Of those buried in the cemetery, 61 remain nameless, whereas others were identified by family or friends. Because of this dark history, this place has been labeled as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the entire world. Disembodied voices coming from these nameless dead can be heard constantly throughout this cemetery. It's believed that the nameless can never truly rest until their identity is revealed. Their souls will never find peace until the world knows who they really were. Apparently, the former caretaker of this cemetery haunts this space as well, and he'll often appear to the visitors. Those that go here have felt like some sort of entity is also pulling at them. Not physically, but as if their souls are being pulled in multiple directions, as if somebody needs your help. This cemetery is definitely on the do not go list if you ever find yourself in Austria. And finally, number 1 on this list is Moosham Castle. Moosham Castle isn't just one of the most haunted spots in Austria or in Europe, it's right up there as being one of the most haunted spots in the world. Ghosts of soldiers, witch trials, werewolves, torturous owners, all of this has happened in the walls of this castle. Starting with the first thing on that list, ghosts of soldiers, there have apparently been over 45 battles that have taken place at this location. It's been said that the ground was soaked with blood during these fights, and they were as gruesome as anything the world had seen to that point. Then, moving on to the witch trials, this place has seen some witches die. In the late 1600s, tons of accused witches were killed here in gruesome ways. Those that weren't murdered had their hands chopped off or were burned with iron, indicating to the world that they were criminals. The rumors of werewolves didn't start until the 1800s, when animals started disappearing from around the area. Then their bodies would start showing up decapitated around the castle, and had the locals living close to the castle believe in a deadly werewolf. Then there were also the rumors that came out about a vicious owner of this castle who would take people inside and torture them before killing them. This was proven when a torture chamber was found in the castle. Obviously, all of this has made the castle one of the most haunted spots in the world. People have said that they get the sensation of hands reaching out and grabbing them from thin air while they're at this castle. Some people have even gone mad after going to this place, saying that it feels like a parasite has entered into their brain. The werewolf has also never been found, and some of the locals believe that it still haunts this place to this day. This castle cannot be visited in any circumstance. It's certainly interesting to research, but visiting it is way too much of a risk.
In at number 5 we have Loftus Hall. This place may be the most haunted house in all of Ireland, and it is said to be haunted by the devil himself. Loftus Hall is a large country house located on the Hook Peninsula in County Wexford. In 1170, Raymond le Gros came to the county and built this massive castle, which was known as the Houseland Castle. The Redmond family replaced the original castle with another in about 1350. This second castle was known as the Hall, or Redmond Hall. Later in 1872, John Henry Wellington Graham Loftus undertook an extensive rebuilding of the entire mansion, adding many of the famous elements like the grand staircase, mosaic tiled floor, elaborate parquet flooring, and technical elements that hadn't been seen in houses in Ireland at the time, such as flushing toilets and blown air heating. Charles Tottenham became the lord of the manor in 1752 by marrying the Honourable Anne Loftus, a daughter of the first Viscount Loftus, and they had 6 children. However, his wife became ill and died while the girls were still young. 2 years later, Tottenham married his cousin Jane Cliff, and they lived together, along with one of Charles's daughters in Loftus Hall. One evening, Charles was resting in his home in 1775 with his second wife and daughter from his first marriage, Anne, while the Loftus family were away on business. During a storm, a ship unexpectedly arrived at the Hook Peninsula, where the mansion was located. A young man was welcomed into the mansion. Anne and the young man became very close. One night, the family and the mysterious man were in the games room playing cards, and it was then when Anne noticed the man having a cloven foot. The man went up through the roof, ultimately leading to his demise and leaving behind a large hole in the ceiling which remains today. Soon Anne became mentally ill. It's believed that the family were ashamed of Anne and locked her away in her favourite room, which was known as the tapestry room. She refused food and drink and sat with her knees under her chin looking out the tapestry room window, waiting for her mysterious stranger to return until she passed away in the tapestry room in 1775. It is said that when she died they could not straighten her body as her muscles had seized, and she was buried in the same sitting position in which she had died. After her death, everyone who had lived there says she still haunts the hall to this day. After being purchased by Aidan Quigley in 2011, this building was marketed as a haunted house that hosted guided tours of the house until 2020, when it was put on the market for sale. In at number 4 we have the Abbey of the Black Hag. The old abbey lies on a small valley about 2 miles east of the village of Shannon Golden in the townland of the Old Abbey. One of the earliest nunneries in Ireland, it is first mentioned in 1298 and was founded on land donated by John Fitzthomas of Conello, who had died in 1261. Remains include the abbey church with 2 small spaces adjacent, and one appears to have been a sacristy and a vaulted building to the west. There are also walls and a gate and traces of an orchard, a fish pond and a pigeon house. Modifications to the church in the 15th century saw the inclusion of an east window in the church as well as a doorway in the north. Traces of window decoration, columns and carved tombstones remain. Barrels were also located and the church plate was reportedly found in the late 18th century. It is said that the last abbess terrified the local population with her use of the black arts and sexual practices in a room to the south of the church, and is now called the Black Hag's Cell. After the closure of the abbey, the hag remained there and continued to perform her unholy acts, and it's believed she lived unusually long, which caused her ancient skin to become darker and darker over time. Another legend is regarding the Earl of Desmond, and that during his escape from one of the many battles between the Geraldines and the Butlers, the Countess was wounded by an arrow. The wound was so serious that the Earl believed the Countess had died and buried her beneath the altar in the main chapel. The Countess awoke to find herself buried alive, and when people would see a ghostly figure, they went to her gravesite and they had found her finger bones had been worn out from clawing at the coffin, and it's believed her screams can still be heard to this day. In at number 3 we have Cork District Lunatic Asylum. The Cork District Lunatic Asylum opened in 1789, and by 1845 the Irish Lunatics Asylum Act allowed for appropriating the lunatic asylum in the city of Cork to the purposes of a district lunatic asylum. The legislation provided for 2 new asylums, a criminal one in Dundrum, Dublin, and then a 500-bed asylum in Cork. This building was originally in 3 separate blocks, later to be joined together in the interest of providing more accommodation. To become the longest facade of any building in the country, it opened in 1852. William Saunders Halloran was an Irish psychiatrist who worked at this asylum from the time it opened until his death, and was the author of practical observations on the causes and cure of insanity. This doctor's methods were extreme and torturous. He created something called the Halloran's chair, which rotated hysterical patients up to 100 revolutions per minute. It rarely had the desired effect. Inmates lived out their days in a state of paranoia and despair while admitted at the asylum. The horrors of this place finally ended when the asylum was closed in 1992. It stayed abandoned for many years, and locals and tourists went to visit this scary place. They claim the tortured souls still remain here, and paranormal investigators even visited and claimed to have seen both and heard voices of these tormented souls. Today the building is being converted and renovated into apartments called Atkins Hall. In at number 2 we have the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club is located on Mount Pellier Hill in Dublin. The building gets its name because it's believed to be one of the first Freemason lodges in Ireland. Around 1725, William Connolly, who was one of the wealthiest men in Ireland at the time, built this building to be a hunting lodge. Years after the build, the roof was blown off during a storm, and locals believed it was the work of an aggressive spirit seeking vengeance on Connolly for building on their land, and that's when the story started swirling. After Connolly's death, the building was quickly sold and is said to have become a meeting place for the Irish Hellfire Club. The club was founded in 1735 by Richard Parsons, a known dabbler in black magic. The members met at locations across Dublin and were known for their immoral behaviour and debauchery involving alcohol and sex. The secrecy surrounding the club members led to speculation that they were Satanists and devil worshippers. The president of the club was named the King of Hell and dressed like Satan with horns, wings and hooves. The members were said to set a place at each meeting for the devil in the hopes that he would attend. They were also said to hold black masses in the lodge, during which cats and even servants were sacrificed. Some say the building was deliberately set on fire in order to enhance its hellish atmosphere. The best known Hellfire Club story is the one in which the devil himself appears. A stranger joined the members at a game of cards. At some point, one of the card players dropped a card on the floor. As he bent down to retrieve it, he noticed that the stranger had cloven hooves instead of feet. Another tale concerns a young farmer, curious to find out what went on in the meetings, climbing up Montpellier Hill one night, he was invited by members of the club and allowed to witness the night's activities. He was found the next morning trembling and terrified. Tradition says he spent the rest of his life unable to speak, unable even to remember his name. The Hellfire Club remains burnt out and abandoned on Montpellier Hill looking over Dublin. It is a beautiful sight on a sunny day, but make sure you leave before night. It's a beautiful sight on a sunny day, but make sure you leave before night comes, because you may come into contact with the unusual smells, ghostly apparitions, or paranormal sightings. And it's said that satanic rituals are known to be done here. And finally, in at number 1 we have Leap Castle. Of the many haunted places in Ireland, Leap Castle is possibly the most notorious of all, and is one of the most well-known symbols of haunted Ireland. This place is located in Kildare in County Offaly. There are many accounts of when the main tower was constructed, but could go back as far as 1250 CE and was built by the O'Bannon clan. The O'Bannons were the secondary chieftains of the territory and were subject to the ruling O'Carroll's clan. There are many stories of who or what haunts this place. A red lady ghost is reported to walk the halls holding a dagger, and also 2 little girls named Charlotte and Emily are reported to run up and down the spiral staircase in the mansion. A red lady ghost is reported to walk the halls holding a dagger, and also 2 girls named Charlotte and Emily are reported to run up and down the spiral staircase in the mansion. Emily passed away after she fell from the top of the castle's tower, and Charlotte can still be seen running around after her sister and calling her name. The castle was visited by paranormal investigators from shows like Most Haunted and Scariest Places on Earth. These investigators believe the castle is haunted by a sinister elemental spirit. The creature is described as being about the size of a sheep with a human face, black holes for eyes and nose, and giving off the smell of a rotting corpse. During renovation of the castle in the 1900s, workers found an oubliette behind a wall in the chapel. At the bottom of the shaft were many human skeletons on wooden spikes. When cleaned out, it took 3 cartloads to remove the bones. Today, the dungeon is now covered over in order to keep people away from it. It's believed that the O'Carrolls would drop guests through the trapdoor to be impaled on the spikes 8 feet below, and could be haunted by the people killed by the O'Carrolls. The castle describes itself as the world's most haunted house, due to the numerous amounts of spirits located here.
Number 5 on this list is the Alkimos wreck. The SS Alkimos was a Greek-owned ship that in 1963 capsized off the coast of Perth, Australia. This ship, prior to its sinking and also to this day, is deeply haunted. Tatum Stafford details its history and writes, "The Alkimos was stranded north of Mindarie Keys in 1963 and is said to be plagued with bad luck. The ship was built in Baltimore in 1943, and towards the end of the war it was used to transport US soldiers and German prisoners of war. Post-war, the ship sailed across the world with various crew members recounting ghost sightings that they'd had on board. In 1963, the ship was on voyage from Jakarta to Bunbury when it struck a reef off the coast of Western Australia. It was towed to Fremantle for repairs, then was sent to Hong Kong before a storm hit and it became stuck in shallow waters off Mindarie. The following year, the ship was sold for parts and left to decay, though mysteriously a number of fires have started, burned, and further blackened the wreck since it was abandoned. Though not much of the Alkimos is visible from land today, there are many rumors about the ship's history of paranormal activity. This includes the discovery of a swimmer's skull in its wreckage, and the stories of a ghost dressed in oilskins named Harry, who's been spotted on board more than once since its sinking. So nowadays, this wreck is the spot for scuba divers who enjoy the paranormal. They frequent it often and also get visited by many spirits who live there. Harry, the ghost that's been seen a lot, is apparently very friendly, which is a nice change of pace from the other hauntings on this list. Many of the people that have had interactions say that he, although sad, is just looking for a friend to reside with him at the bottom of the ocean. Even though this is on the list about places to never visit, I don't think that we immediately need to write off this spot. If you're daring and you know how to scuba dive, then I suppose you could probably go and have a pretty decent experience with our main guy Harry. Number 4 on this list is the St. John's Orphanage. Not that anyone would ever want to be an orphan to begin with, but if you ever were sent to an orphanage, this certainly wouldn't be first on your list of options. This place is your stereotypical horrible orphanage. The type of place that you watch in a movie and then call your parents immediately afterwards and thank them for being around for you. Apparently the people who ran this place were just inherently cruel. If a child ever stepped out of line a little bit or even did something wrong by accident, the punishments would be swift and brutal. The lifestyle of any child who lived here was said to be pretty horrible, and those that stayed here were often scarred for life. Now it's abandoned and looks like something straight out of a a horror film. The windows are broken and the whole building itself looks like something that society has collectively thrown away. This hasn't stopped the ghosts of those who used to stay here from haunting it though. It isn't what you might be expecting, however. You won't find the ghosts of children running through the halls or playing ball outside. I imagine that the ghosts of those said children would want to get as far away from this horrible place as possible. The one who does haunt this place though is actually the one who used to run it. This greasy and stern looking old man that's said to parade around the halls. Apparently he's only ever dangerous to children, and any adults that come to this place should be fine. That being said, I still wouldn't recommend that adults go here because it's all too eerie to begin with. In my personal opinion, I think that there's been too much awful history here to allow this building to remain standing. I'd burn it to the ground and leave those horrible practices where they belong. Deep in the past. Number 3 on this list is Dreamworld. Now, how on earth could a place called Dreamworld be haunted? Well, apparently it all started when the people who filmed the hit reality TV show Big Brother had quite the ghostly encounter. That's right guys, the legends of a ghost at this place have been pretty recent and by an entire film crew. Dreamworld is one of Australia's biggest amusement parks and should be a place of pure joy. The makers of Big Brother decided to build a home at this place and host their show there. During the filming of one of the seasons though, the production crew ran into an unexpected individual. The voice and image of a young girl appeared to all of them on separate occasions during the filming process and scared them to their core. The show was eventually cancelled in 2014, but then a YouTuber named Moosham went into the abandoned Big Brother house and it definitely looks haunted. The entire place looks like something straight out of a ghost story and makes me believe that some type of spirit could be living there. It also doesn't help that this little girl isn't the only ghostly apparition talked about at Dreamworld. Apparently some employees at the theme park have seen a ghost called Jack Dark. Jack Dark is reportedly a 19th century gold prospector who was killed by a buzzsaw. Now his decapitated ghost wanders the area where he was killed, and it just so happens that there's a theme park there now. If you ever do make it to Dreamworld, then don't stay too long. Ride the rides and then get out of there. If you stick around for an extended period of time, then you might have an unwelcome encounter as well. Number 2 on this list is the Aradale Mental Hospital. The Aradale Mental Hospital has got to be right up there as one of the most deadly mental hospitals in the world. Now what I mean by that is how many total people passed away within the walls of said hospital during its operation. For the Aradale Mental Hospital, this number was not insignificant. In its 140 years of operating, it saw over 13,000 people pass away. That's close to almost 100 people every single year that it was active. Just an absolutely horrendous statistic that speaks to the manner in which this hospital was run. If you've been watching this channel for a while, then you know that mental institutes built in the 1800s were often horrible places to get sent. The procedures and practices that these places had weren't helpful in the slightest and often made those with mental illness get far worse. This was obviously the case here due to its overwhelmingly large death toll. 13,000 people is a lot of people to die, and it's left its mark on this location. The site is no longer used as a mental hospital and has been decommissioned for a few decades. Now, it's just a spot for ghost tours. Not a tour I recommend that you take, but if you do, you can expect to hear some loud screams, doors shutting without anyone around them, and temperature changes that just don't make any sense. Some rooms are more haunted than others, and there's one specific bedroom where tons of those 13,000 people died that's just brimming with bad spiritual energy. In a few rare cases, there have been instances where people have left the tour with scratches on their bodies that they don't even remember receiving. I understand the appeal if you're someone who loves the paranormal, but I just don't think that it's worth it considering all the negative juju that surrounds this deadly hospital. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Fremantle Prison. The Fremantle Prison is a former Australian prison that has quite the name for itself. This place was known for housing the most dangerous and the most deadly prisoners in Australia's history. Once again, Tatum Stafford writes, originally known as the convict establishment, the Fremantle Prison was built by convicts between 1852 and 1859 using limestone quarried on site. During its period of operation, the prison housed the majority of the state's murderers, thieves, and rogues, and during both World Wars, it was used by the Australian Army as a military prison for POWs. As time went on, it became increasingly difficult to accommodate modern prisoner management systems into a 19th century building, so in 1991 the WA State Cabinet decided to close the prison. Today, it's one of the world's largest surviving convict prisons with plenty of rumored paranormal activity. In its time as a jail, 44 people were executed at its gallows. Just one of them was a woman, Martha Rendell. Martha was convicted of murdering her 3 children, and legend has it that her face occasionally appears in the chapel window. So Stafford mentions one of the ghosts there, Martha Rendell, who lives in the chapel, but he doesn't mention Jack, who's actually a friendly library ghost. Jack is typically pretty chill, but the rest of them are horrible. Martha and the other ghosts that were here are the most sadistic murderers who ever lived in Australia, and they haven't changed much in death either. Going to this place and not being in a big group is actually life-threatening. These are the type of ghosts who will not hold back and will want to murder you for the fun of simply murdering you. Obviously, because of this, I cannot in good conscience recommend going here. There are countless documentaries on Netflix about serial killers, and that is a far safer way to learn about them than going to this prison.